Sorry, gang, hang on 1 second here. Sorry, I hope this is being broadcast. God. Huh. Hang on, guy. Hang on. I don't think I'm looking at my computer. It doesn't seem like it's being broadcast. Let me try this.
Is also the mastermind behind the Daily Evolver podcast, which is a podcast of integral insight into politics and culture. And as I was joking with Jeff the other day, he is in my ear weekly because I am a friend of the pod, and it actually brings me great pleasure to be hosting Jeff for his session on Tormented by Trump. This television. So with no further ado, Jeff, the room is yours.
Yeah, well, thank you, Miles, and thanks for pulling this together. It's always fun to be in an integral crowd, even virtually. We're sort of learning how to do that these days.
Yes,
I've done my share of real live space, and this is also good.
Yeah,
so, yeah,
absolutely
so
is.
I hope this is. My session here in context of a little bit of what you've done. You've laid a good foundation for how culture and consciousness evolve and how conflict evolves along with it. And I know there's more of that to come. And I want to zero in on and how conflict evolves along with life, practical source of conflict for a lot of people, particularly in America, but I think all over the place in various forms. And I'll introduce it by telling a quick story of something that happened to me today. And it wasn't particularly unusual. I had lunch with my friend Linda, and we agreed over a lovely beet salad that
Mm-mm.
definitely needs some air. It definitely needs some flow because it is getting so polarized and so fixated.
Yeah.
That and this beautiful thought experiment of of an equal and opposite anti-hero in a way would definitely does that, because it is a feeling that we go into.
Yeah.
Trump evokes certain feelings in everybody, and to counterbalance that so we don't get polarized, it would be good to evoke the opposite feelings.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually one of the things that Trump has taught me that I didn't really realize. And that is, my thesis is that Trump is, in important ways, in terms of self-sense, at red. He's at the sort of pre-traditional stage where might is right, and it's the authoritarian. And it's actually, we talk about it being post-truth, it's actually pre-truth.
Yeah, it's pre-truth.
It's before rationality really comes online. And so he lives in this world where it's just about power dynamics. And it is, the first word we use to describe it is egocentric. And it's a stage of development in children and teenagers, sort of reprise it a little bit. And it's all healthy. Is in its place, and it has a lot of power, and it has a lot of juice. And that's the thing that I didn't realize, that people could really take that into the public square in the way that he did.
It's amazing.
It is. Amazing. But that juice is riveting. It just sort of underlies everything when we realize that there's a red strata that we all have that is activated by this guy. And again, this love or hate, but it's powerful.
Yeah, and his relationship to the truth is interesting. Billy Bush, who was the host of the Access Hollywood tape,
but it's powerful.
And his relationship to the truth is interesting. Billy Bush, he felt his career's over since that tape. Trump, ironically.
Oh, there's a whole line of dead bodies in Donald Trump's.
Oh my God. And he was on, I think, the Bill Maher show, and he was being interviewed, and he said, I think it was on The Apprentice, season 4 or whatever, and his ratings were quite high in the first few seasons, but then they went down, and but he just kept telling people, no, we're rated number one. And at a certain point, Billy Bush kind of pulled him to the side, and he said, look, Donald, you can't exactly say that, it's not true. And he says, look, you don't understand. You just say it like it's true, and they believe you.
Yeah.
And that's his relationship to the truth. Yeah. And every single day, 7,400 and whatever of this presidency, not to mention his lifetime. Yeah. Just like it's true, and they believe you.
Yeah. And it drives the people who have reached rationality and beyond crazy. In terms of that, again, that self-set. I think, Trump's red, his supporters are mainly what we would call amber traditional. Mm-hmm. But they, again, just as I said, they like where he's taken the world, because he's taken the world in their direction. And they forgive his red tendencies. And let's hope that that's, his history forgives that. We'll see. But indeed, it's polarizing. And there's even an upside to that, in the sense that one of the engines of evolution is just this principle of differentiation and integration. Mm. And the sort of bigger model is we moved from a state where things are fused, or sort of one blobby thing. Mm-hmm. And that blobby thing realizes that it's actually a couple things, and it begins to pull apart and differentiate and become this and that, and me and not me. And that is a actual progress. It's painful. That's the painful part of evolution. And then we get to this tension of polarization that then brings forth a new integration. And it's an integration of what is worthy of bringing forward into a new thing. And it's radical. Just as putting hydrogen and oxygen into a bottle and shaking it doesn't create water, but the integration of the chemical reaction between hydrogen and oxygen does. It creates this whole new thing that's wet, And we see that at every stage of development. And there is there's a lot of, again, dead bodies that are in the wake of this process of differentiation and integration. And I think one of the things that we can be happy about in this is that we are now having our conflict and warfare, at least in the developed world. You guys at Israel are getting some rockets and bombs, but in America, we just do it in the comments section. Mm. We merely assassinate each other's character. And that is progress. It's not pain. There's no pain-free option. I think that's one of the things that at Integral we can sort of get in a deeper way, that there's no conflict-free option. And that the idea that there is actually a first-tier fantasy, because every first-tier meme has an idea of how the world should be. And that if only we hadn't run it into the ditch, if only we human beings hadn't screwed it up, fallen from grace, fallen from paradise, created an eco-disaster, whatever it is, every stage has their story about it, then we'd be fine. And if everybody saw the world the way I do, we would be fine.
All would be good.
Yeah. But at Integral, we realize there's people at every stage, and they actually get to be there. And this differentiation that we're seeing in American politics will ultimately, if we survive it, and I think we will, be fruitful. And that we can actually, as integralists, stop being quite as contracted around the liberal policies that a lot of us have, in the sense that, not in the sense that we don't want the goals we want, but in the sense that there's an actual movement of history that is afoot, and that we can trust emergence more than we have to trust institutions, or ways of doing things. And that that also helps me to be friendly to this red authoritarian that has arisen to the pinnacle of power in America, and to realize that to the degree that he's shaking up NATO, to the degree that he's shaking up this globalist worldview, that where money is the the factor of immigration is people just all of it. We can the conservative point of view. They actually have a point that nations do not have to continue to go breakneck into globalism and multiculturalism when in the process they're leaving huge portions of their population behind. We actually thought we could do that. I did. I thought that the modern consensus, at least, was online, and that free trade and all of that good stuff was online, and the sexual revolution. And it's one of the things that we liberals really underestimate, and that is to the degree that we have won the culture war. And, with marriage and gays and the whole sexual revolution and feminism and civil rights, there's more to do. We have to do a lot of work in the interiors, but the exterior work in terms of the legal structures and so forth are pretty much online there. And, to a traditionalist who thinks that men ought to be men and women ought to be women, and that God is in his heaven, and this world is not my home, and I'm here to be faithful, that there is pornography pouring from the satellites into the computers of their grandchildren is just stunning.
Yeah.
Like, how did that happen? And the way we talk to each other, and music and pop culture and video games, and what's going on here? And those people actually, they get to be here. And we have to create a world that is friendly and respectful to them. And I don't exactly know what that is, but I do think that the polarization that we're experiencing, will bear fruit in the sense that I'm way clearer on who my political opponents are now than I used to be. And I'm way friendlier to them than I used to be. And mainly because Trump and all of this has challenged my conditioned thinking, my conditioned mind that just sort of blandly thought that the modern consensus was the right way to go and let's go forward. These people will catch up, and that's the way the cookie crumbles. And I'm glad for that. I'm glad I'm not under that delusion anymore, and that I have broken out of that sort of, as a Buddhist using Dharma, the state of ignorance.
It's been a wake-up call, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I love how you talk, Jeff. That in a way it's a hallmark of integral consciousness, or some type of integral awareness or integral understanding. That we can definitely look back and as you said, everybody has a right to be where they're at. Why? Because we've also been through those stages ourselves. It's not that we just have this kind of intellectual map and say, oh yeah, they're ABC. But no, we grew through all of that. And there, but for the grace of God, goes I. We were fortunate enough and had the right conditions to continue to evolve and come into contact with people and communities and cultures that helped us grow. And but at the same time, we recognize that everybody has a right to be where they're at. We realize that we want to grease the skids. We want to kind of help things move along, because you can't force evolution to happen. You can't force a depth of consciousness. You can't force complexity of consciousness, but you can meet it where it's at, but hopefully not leave it where it's at.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are more or less skillful ways to move forward. You can look back at the first half of the 20th century, the world wars and all of the, revolutions and all of the, famines and bloodshed, and say that was evolutionarily potent too, because it was. But God, could we have done it a little more humanely? And I'm not sure at that stage of development we could have, actually, because we had pre-modern mentality and modern weaponry. But and pre-modern mentality is sort of innately, I guess the nice word is ethnocentric, and when it goes bad, it's genocidal.
Yeah.
But it's certainly not remarkable at that stage of development for either of those things. So, how we move forward in a way that, of course, what's happening in green, and this is why I'm not as appalled by the idea of conservative judges on the Supreme Court as I used to be, because I am a little bit afraid of what the mean green meme will do as it continues to come online, and I think that having a more conservative Supreme Court, it will check some of the excesses of affirmative action or quotas, that sort of thing, speech control, political correct speech, and that sort of things. That I don't know. See, but this is where I'm grateful, and maybe it's a cop out, but at Integral, I'm not as I see it as contracted around what happens in the short term, because I do trust the long term. And I do trust that there is a center of gravity that we have reached, that at least it will be peaceful in terms of the, internal politics in America. And I do trust that the systems of the courts and the law enforcement and so forth, and the separation of powers. The founding fathers knew Donald Trump. Actually,
Well, yeah, exactly.
Donald Trump wouldn't surprise them one bit. The whole idea of the Constitution was to keep a autocrat from coming in and taking over, and it's going to be tested here. And it's going to be a wild year coming up.
Well, Jeff, let me ask you something. Maybe zoom out a little bit on this whole thing, because you'd mentioned you're a liberal. I grew up in a liberal household. Did you grow? Because you're from the Midwest. Did you grow up in a liberal household, or?
No, I grew up in a conservative household.
Okay, so it's something that came to you later, yeah. Now, I grew up in a liberal household, and I was very happy to have grown up in a liberal household, but only later did I realize it had its limitations as well. So, all my practices were incredibly, I was in Japan doing Aikido for 8 years, and I practiced in Burma for 2 years, and Nepal for another year.
Right.
Deep conservative, even dogmatic traditional cultures. And I was able to kind of hold that in my consciousness because I loved what I was doing there, but also at the same time, I didn't drink the Kool-Aid. I realized that it was limited in its worldviews, but the practices themselves were beautiful.
Yeah,
and it was helping me grow. It was helping me fill out what was missing in me.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly. I love what you just said. That's exactly what we do. It sounds like you just did it. Sort of instinctively as an integral guy with integral consciousness. And that is, we see this meme stack. We see all these stages of development that are in us. And none of us have them all online, or even any of them really online in a really optimal way. So we want to go back and reinstall or shore up our traditional, what you did, discipline, obedience, form, lineage. Damn, that's good stuff. Accountability.
Yeah, sure. Responsibility, all of those things. And it was important. And it did shore me up, and it straightened me up in many ways. And at the same time, it doesn't, I realized that's a piece of the puzzle that was this stack that needed to be filled out in a way.
Yeah,
and I'm just wondering, if we go back to our focus of being tormented by Trump, I'm right there with you, but I also realize that many people are not, and I think it's a very complex situation of who he is, kind of his emotional habits of not being a nice person, for my opinion. At the same time, I can recognize he has a charming side because he's a schmoozer. He might be using it for the good intentions or bad intentions, but he's a very skilled schmoozer. Mm-hmm. And politically, his instincts are incredible. He just knows exactly what to say to the right time, right place, to galvanize a whole political swath of the American population.
Yeah.
So maybe before we continue to kind of, because I think you and I could do a tap dance on this all day long. I would love to hear from you, and maybe I'll join you. What do you see that is good, true, and beautiful about the President of the United States?
Are you opening that to everybody or to me?
Yeah, to everybody, but to you, just between us, because he does have. He must have some redeeming qualities. I mean, the first thing that I can see personally is that, he actually does have love for his family. Now, maybe when push comes to shove, he might choose himself over his kids. I don't know, in the moment of truth, but you can definitely see he does have love for his family. And that's one of the things that kind of the first thing that comes to my mind.
Yeah.
How about for you? What do you think is good, true?
For sure. Well, there's a lot beautiful about Red even, and Red loves her family.
Right.
Red loves her family and not much else. That's the circle's small at Red.
Yeah.
And so, but it's real love, and absolutely.
And protectors.
Yes, exactly. And sort of, And I think Trump wants to be that. I think he wants to be a big hero. It's a heroic. It's the stage of superheroes and power gods, that sort of thing. All the Marvel comic, it's about coming in and setting the world right and saving things. And I actually think that Trump believes that. And I actually think that he may believe that he would be more true to the good as he sees it, to do what Bill Maher is suggesting he's going to do and fearful he's going to do, which is basically not leave peacefully.
Right, yeah.
And, in this last week where he talked about, well, the police and the military and the biker gangs like me, boy, you just don't hear that kind of thing in America.
Yeah.
But there it is. And for somebody for whom, again, the center of gravity is pre-modern in a way, this whole constellation of laws and legal precedents and all of that stuff, he knows it's there. He's had to sort of deal with it. But it doesn't mean anything to him.
A lot. He's had to deal with it a lot in his own personal life.
Yeah. And he uses it as a cudgel, lawsuits and always renegotiating and stiffing people and all of the stuff that, that sort of red execution of capitalism, that thuggish, mafia kind of thing. And, but, we'll see to what degree he stayed on the right side of the law. Boy, we're having apparently a very, extensive investigation of the whole Trump thing. And I think history will show us. And I doubt we'll be terribly surprised. He's a, cheater, but he apparently has stayed on the side of the law in most ways. And we'll see. I mean, I actually just don't know. I can't wait. Somebody was telling me that they had a friend who, tragically got a bad diagnosis for pancreatic cancer, and they didn't have a whole lot of time to live. And their response to the doctor was, "You mean I won't live to see the Mueller report?" And so I want to live to see that. I want to know what the heck is going on here. But yeah, there's a big daddy quality of taking care of everybody, and by everybody I mean everybody in my circle. Everybody who supports me. And also there's a reality distortion quality that comes with Red that is very appropriate at Red, because we actually don't have laws and we don't have, 5-year plans, and we basically are responding to the enemy. We're responding to conditions, and the truth is whatever I say it is. And we hear stories of, Elon Musk does his share of that. Steve Jobs was notorious for it. And that reality distortion thing. And Trump is, and what's so tormenting about Trump is that he does it in plain view.
Yeah.
Shamelessly.
Yeah, because he's not burdened
exactly
by the conventions of
exactly
the other sides.
Yeah, that sort of shame, that flavor of guilty shame, isn't really functioning. Yeah, it's not online in the way that it is with people at the later stages of development. And there's I've gotten some insight into him as, a personality with some of the research on, particularly there was an article in The Atlantic on psychopathic children. They don't call them that anymore. They call it children with callous disorder or something like that. But one of the things they found about them, because they're developing treatments for these kids, because they're, it's not easy to be a psychopath, actually. And psychopaths are people too. And it's sweet in a way. You read this article, you realize this is a disability. This is a missing piece of the antenna that a lot of us have, that Trump, I don't think, does have. And it shows up in a way that is uniquely Trumpian. And these kids, they found, do not respond to punishment. They respond to rewards. And so Trump doesn't have the receptors for the kind of criticism they would find in these treatments for these kids. They like it because they're getting attention. So criticism doesn't have the same effect that it does on the rest of us. Mm-hmm. But rewards do. And so praise, and they give these kids these complex systems of gold stars and all of these things that they can collect and get. And that's the treatment. And I think that gives me, I think that helps me see Trump not just as an enemy, but as a person who has this makeup.
Yeah, and I think that also, reflecting that he just happens to be a person that is not unburdened by, that is not burdened, by how can I say this? By the truth, by facts.
Yeah, not burdened by facts, absolutely,
and criticism, etc.
Yeah.
And yet, I think we need to be careful not to kind of go down that same route. I hear in your talk, even though you're letting yourself kind of state your feelings, you're also making attempts. You're also stretching to actually understand that level of consciousness, to where that's coming from.
Exactly.
So in a way, we have a greater responsibility. No, the greater the depth of consciousness, the greater the complexity of perspective, also the greater responsibility to kind of see the world from that perspective.
Yeah. Well, it's like you said in your session, Miles, it's, that survival in emotional zero-sum response, that's easy.
It's
that's hard. Exactly. Thank you. Yeah. That's hardwired.
Yeah.
And so we want to notice that and see that as an object instead of a subject. We want to see that as, I can see that in Jeff. I could see myself doing that. And so, as I did in lunch today, I indulged it. It felt good. And it has it's a little bit of an art form, but I don't buy it. I don't identify with it in the way that I used to. And, that's part of my practice in general, and I think part of the fruits of the practice. But I will say that Donald Trump has provided a booster rocket in that project, culturally and politically at least. And, maybe I'm grateful to him for that. I mean, he's a spectacularly good, bad example. And maybe there's something to be said for that.
Yes, indeed. Actually, I want to invite anybody else on the call. If you have any comments, or you want to jump in, you have a question for Jeff, just raise your hand. You can just press the participants button at the bottom, and there'll be an option for you to raise your hand and jump in. In the meantime, I recall I believe it was Don Beck that said, and I'm not sure if it was when Trump took office or was a previous shocking culturally political moment. And he says that evolution is like that. When it's not stable enough, what it does is that it backs up, and that means that we have some purification to do, so we have some cleaning up to do, and we have some more stabilization to do at the previous levels before we can move forward. Because it did, like you were saying, it did look very much like we were progressing in so many beautiful ways.
Yeah, exactly.
So institutionally, and in the courts, and in many ways.
In culture.
In culture, and then suddenly, many of us, quite a few of us, had a massive wake-up call in the last election.
Yeah. That these people were not going to be left behind. And I'm glad. I thought they were. Absolutely. I was okay with it. And now I'm not. And I'm glad I'm not. I don't want them to be. I actually they have something that I was missing. And, you talk about going and doing your martial arts, and boy, that is that's a hardcore way of really getting that traditional stage really, online. Yeah. And there's a lot of people, we don't have initiations into new stages as earlier cultures did. And so there's a lot of people who really don't have a very well traditional consciousness installed. And I think of one who is the son of a friend of mine, and I've known him since he's a kid. I know him very well. And he is, Boulder wasn't liberal enough for him, and so he moved to Portland. And, he's just as green as if he's so counterculture. And it also has had that disease of green, which is just sort of a depression and this sort of idea that the world is, we're sitting in an ever darkening world, and the capitalism and all of that stuff, and patriotism was not only not appealing, it was embarrassing and repulsive. And he's worked at a coffee shop, and what has happened to him is that he has discovered Jordan Peterson. And you know who that is, Miles?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, of course. And most people, I think listening.
Stand up straight. Straighten your room.
Yes, exactly. The 12 Rules for Life. Something about chaos to order. And boy, that's what traditionalism does. Yeah. That red stage, the stage previous, the warrior stage, we call it, previous to traditionalism, is chaotic. Yeah. It's might versus right. It's egocentric. It's impulsive. And at traditional, we learn how to sit down and shut up and sit up straight and clean our room and be nice and be a man and, be worthy of a woman and all. He has a lot of women who are fans, but he has a really strong message for young men. Yeah. And hallelujah. Unfortunately, it's tinged with it gets sort of mixed in with a lot of the conservative, ethnocentric, and blah blah blah, and it is very polarized against green, and it doesn't see green fully as a legitimate new stage of development, and as a result, Peterson and his gang really have a bump up against a ceiling where they just have to keep trying to find truth and the history of Western civilization and the Gulag, and they have this whole complicated, thing that I think is unnecessary and, keeps us stuck. But they're doing God's work on the other hand. And, that's just one of the ways that culture corrects itself.
Yeah, right. Well, Jeff, if we can go back to being tormented by Trump, which is the title of this talk, so we're allowing ourselves to kind of express that, and also at the same time holding that space for the Trump within us. One of our listeners asked, what aspect of this red leadership stage that Jeff thinks Trump manifests are ethos that mankind can take forward in the revolution and are desirable in our self-governance.
Yeah.
Governance, excuse me. So which aspects of red leadership do you think are worthy of taking forward?
A certain saying it the way it is for you. Yeah. Now, red thinks you're just saying it the way it is. When you take red forward, you realize you're saying it the way it is for you.
Nice. That's nice.
But there is something that is really powerful about that, and there's something that's liberating about that. And it's funny about Trump because he is a inveterate liar. There's no question about that. But he's also paradoxically the most authentic political figure on the landscape. He is.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah, he is. And
for all of those postmodern liberals who sensitive selves that honor authenticity, you got to respect that about the guy.
There's some authenticity for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you like it? Be careful what you wish for. But yet, if you think about the best relationships we have, where we have the most of us fully online with another person, I think of my dear friends. We talk shit with each other.
Oh, yeah, totally.
We talk shit about each other. We do not hold back.
Yeah.
We are not politically correct.
Yeah.
We would not want our conversations to be, put out on the internet. But it's great, because there's more of us online, and we actually want that.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
We want that fierce part. We want that. shit kicker part of us online because it's fun. And when it's contained and,
appropriate.
Yeah, exactly. By these, the stages that have come online later, civilized it. Now those stages, they not only civilize it, they repress it. So we want to release that repression, let this power come out and forward, and trust that we're civilized enough to handle it.
Beautiful. Jeff, listen, we have Fleet Mall seems to be on the call. I've never met Fleet, but I know the name. If it's the same Fleet Mall, let me go ahead and open up your mic, Fleet. Your mic, oh, wait a second. Hang on, let me unmute your mic. Okay, your mic is open. You there?
Yeah, hey, Miles. Good to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Fleet. Well, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, I was actually lived in Boulder during the early years of the Integral movement. Moved to the East Coast in 2010. So yeah, really found all the presentations fascinating so far. And McIntosh, is that his name?
Steve McIntosh, yes.
Steve McIntosh, yeah. The presentation. Watched that with a group here at our center this evening or early or late in the afternoon. So really great stuff. Yeah, it's been interesting for me that even though I've been, following Ken's works and for a long, long time, 3 decades probably, and but still, even though I had all this stuff about the green meme, even a couple of decades ago, or at least 15 years ago, I still kind of felt like that was my tribe. And it was really about 2 years ago that I felt like either they kicked me out of the tribe or I got kicked out of the tribe. and it's really been a difficult place to be for the last couple of years, to find myself railing against what used to be my tribe. Which, like, a lot of discussions we've had, you almost feel like you're putting yourself with the conservatives. And I find myself really some of the podcasts and books of some of the modernists who are, the Pinkers and Jordan Peterson and others, really appealing. Even though I really feel myself much more an integral thinker, or at least an aspiring one. And so my question is to explore a little, Terry, around this whole discussion around responsibility. I have felt for a long time, been telling people for a long time that, the problem with our political system is you have one side that says everything is about personal responsibility and absolutely refuses to look at causes and conditions and sees that as a slippery slope away from any sense of personal responsibility. And the other side sees personal responsibility as just some kind of conspiracy of the right to further victimize the oppressed and doesn't want to talk about anything other than cause and conditions. And of course, it's both and. We all know that. And so I'm wondering about I'm not trying to plug a book, but I have a book coming out called Radical Responsibility. And this book's mostly about the personal part, although I talk about the other. But I think if I can manage to birth a second book, it'll be the integration of personal responsibility and collective responsibility. And trying to find that not just the middle way, but the integrated way of those two things. So I just wanted to throw that out there and curious about your responses around this issue of responsibility and how we relate with it. Because it's a word that either gets demonized or misused or, yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I do think that it's a both and thing. But, so that's sort of the ideal. And then moving towards it is the tougher part, because how do we integrate this thing that really still wants to be polarized? It's like a magnet. We want to be pulled one side or the other, personal responsibility or cause and conditions, or, sort of social issues that and karmas. And I think one of the things that I've been doing lately is I'm just sort of going back and forth. I'm being buffeted by it myself. And one of the things that's been interesting to me lately is to dive deeper into what's true about the green realization. And even, what's true about microaggressions? What's true about identity politics? We know what's bullshit about them. But what's true about them? And really, what I'm getting is that people really want to be deeply seen, and they want their karmas are real from their, whether it's racial or gay or whatever, that sort of oppressed thing, those are real, and people feel them. And as I said, we in terms of like civil rights, we got that handled legally, but there's the experiment that we all, I've heard it cited many times, where resumes go out under the name John, under the name Juan, and under the name Jamal. And
the same resume.
Yeah, the same resume, and the responses are, just the way we think they would be. And that sort of thing does actually need to be addressed and felt and metabolized. And so I'm working on that side of the street too. And I don't know, it's a work in progress, but I'm happy to hear what you have to say about it, Fleet or Miles.
Well, that's the difficulty about this, is all those issues need to be addressed.
Right.
They're all real issues. It's all real suffering. And does, turning that into identity and the whole binary of it's funny that the postmodernists hate binary, they're always railing against these and then the binary of the oppressed and the oppressor is what that thing is all about. Right. So does that actually help address these issues? And then the strategies become intimidation and shaming and so on.
Well, they turn the dominator hierarchy on its head and think that's the solution. So now the perpetrator and it's the oppressed becomes the perpetrator.
The really slippery thing about it, though, is the issues are real. And if one doesn't kind of go along with the group think around that, which has become such a powerful cultural force, you're almost immediately, you're trying to dig yourself out of a hole of being labeled, as a conservative or worse, right?
Racist.
Or not compassionate or racist or what have you, if you're really, because that's what's so compelling and transitory about that position. And I somehow wonder what, I had a teacher in one of the first clinical ethicists in the country. This was during my years in prison doing the hospice work. And he used to share this story about one of the things, and I don't know the accuracy of it, but one of the things that began to unravel slavery, the buy-in to slavery among abolitionists and Quakers, but among Christian communities, probably mostly in the North, or in the mid-states, was not, because it was clear that you could be a Christian and own slaves, because there were clearly people who, by most all requirements, were good Christians, good family, and they owned slaves. So you kind of couldn't. But the question was, which is an idea of like Fran Peavy's work around strategic questioning, like, is it necessary to own slaves to be a good Christian? And that kind of. So what is the strategic questioning that begins to unravel that position? And maybe helps people make the leap from being really caught in that postmodernist identity to a possibly more integral view.
Right on. Yeah, well said.
Well, what are you supposed to answer? What is the question? What is that question that's going to be the thread you pull where it all starts to... Yeah.
It seems very much that's the moment that we are living into right now. That question is the question that we are living into.
Yeah.
Or the answer to that question is the whole kind of koan of this moment in a way.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and I always love what my meditation teacher Shinzen Young used to say. The best way to get from point A to point B is to be fully at point A. So we're marinating in it. The conflict is an engine of evolution. Evolution is beautiful but not pretty, and we want to be friendly to that.
I have to say, Jeff, I'm glad to hear you do a little and because you are a paragon of compassionate integralism, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh my goodness! Thank you, Fleet.
You really do want to see the good in all of it. So do I, but I have a much harder time than you.
Well, I have a harder time than it seems sometimes too.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Fleet, I want to thank you very much for joining the Telesummit and jumping in on the call. I'd love to hear your voice again in upcoming sessions.
Yeah, good to see you, Fleet. I remember you from Naropa days. You came in when I was in the MDiv program and did a couple things. It was really wonderful, and it's good to see you again.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. So Jeff, we've kind of come up to the end of our session. The hour has flown by, as all times. It just kind of occurred to me that we are also, not only are we living into the koan of this question, but we are living in the middle of history. So the whole idea of the torment of Trump and it can go both ways, and I'm not naive about that. But it's going to be interesting to see where this will take us. So thank you very much for choosing this topic. And listen, I will give you the last word. I've got a few announcements to make, and then I'll pass it over to you. But I do want to know, we're asking all the teachers, what is your top tip for working with conflict? And I'll come back to you in just a second for that. So for my closing announcements, first, I'm going to put some links here just a moment. You can find more about Jeff Salzman at the website, The Daily Evolver. Hang on a second, I'm waiting for that link to pop up. Something's going on with this chat box here. It's coming up very slow. It's probably going to be double. There it is. You can find more about Jeff at The Daily Evolver, and I highly recommend that you load his podcast into your phone. And he's got some great weekly episodes, if not every other week. I guess you're going on holidays now. So that's at thedailyobama.com. We also have a Facebook group for those of you who are on Facebook, still using Facebook. You can go over and join there. We get daily updates and all the daily schedule. We're posting a lot of things over there. Plus, you get to be with this amazing community on the Facebook group. So the link is there, Dharma and the Evolution of Conflict. Go, request to join us. This session has been recorded like all the other sessions, and it will be posted tomorrow. We finished today's session. I'll send out an email with tomorrow's schedule, and all of the sessions for today will be up. They'll be up online for free to watch for the duration of the Telesummit and probably a few days afterwards. However, if you like to keep the Telesummit collection, we are also selling the complete Telesummit archive package for $147. That's a $50 discount for everyone during the duration of the Telesummit. This is a total labor of love, but it does take time, energy, and some money to put these things together. So if you want to support this project, what we're doing here, then definitely go over. Win-win all around. It's going to be a great package to have for future reference. And finally, I do want to mention that I'm going to be teaching a 5-day retreat with Diane Musho Hamilton. Diane and I have been doing Dharma and the Evolution of Conflict events for the past 1.5 to 2 years, online and in person. And we're going to be doing another 5-day retreat in Torrey, Utah, beautiful high desert in southern Utah. We'd love to have you come join us May 15th to 19th, 2019. Amazing place, amazing content, and an amazing group of people to come and practice with. So with that, Jeff, I'd like to pass it over to you for the final word.
It's going to sound so sort of prosaic, but I really do think that love as a practice is real important to conflict. And I'll just give the quickest example. And that is, it's sort of a long story, but I'm having this sort of conflict relationship with a guy in the neighborhood, and we don't even know each other that well, but it's but we've had a couple bad run-ins, and I've had all these fantasies and what I would say, and I nurture all of this sort of, I could feel my contraction and all of the emotions that I feel when I think about him. And the only thing that softens that for me is some version of Tonglen, basically.
Yeah, totally.
Where I'm just breathing him in a little bit and breathing out a little bit of smile, a little bit of goodwill. And to do that not as, it's not like I can flip a switch, but I can do that as a practice. And I think that has just been, a golden route for me to deal with conflict a few times in my life.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, great, Jeff. Well, thank you so much. And I
thank you, Miles.
You're off to vacation down in Mexico, so have a wonderful time. And I hope you get a little respite from the political climate of the day. And I'll be looking forward to listening to your podcast when you get back.
Great. Thanks so much.
Great, Justin. Thank you, everybody. All the best. Next session is with Brian Robertson and